this sister the best of outcomes going forward in the future. Should be solved number 2 says how one individual helped expand slavery. This came with a link that's going to take us to X. And this is a post from Great House or X Spots the Mark on Twitter. He said Thomas Jefferson was responsible for the largest expansion of slavery in history. After the collapse of the Virginia tobacco industry, Virginia slaveholders turned to slave trading as their primary source of revenue. But Virginia slave prices were being undercut by Carolina rice farmers with slave imports from Africa's rice coast, Sierra Leone. Jefferson pushed for a ban on the importation of slaves from Africa, not out of altruism, but to protect the burgeoning slave trading industry in his home state of Virginia. Jefferson himself was a Virginia slaveholder. After the ban of the importation of slaves from Africa went into effect in 1807, Virginia became the primary supplier of slaves for the Carolina rice farms and the Deep South cotton fields. This led to an explosion of slave breeding in Virginia. Throughout the course of slavery, Virginia would go on to breed and sell more slaves than any single African slave empire in the transatlantic slave trade era. For some perspective, the infamous West African kingdom of Dahomey, at its peak in the mid-19th century, sold an estimated 10,000 slaves a year to Europeans. The city of Richmond, Virginia, exceeding that total in a single month, selling 10,000 slaves a month to the Deep South. Jefferson once boasted, quote, "I consider a woman who brings a child every 2 years is more profitable than the best man of the farm. What she produces is an addition to capital, while his labors disappear in mere consumption." Jefferson also acquired the Louisiana territories from France and oversaw the westward expansion of slavery. According to Jefferson, neglecting to expand slavery would be, quote, "an act of suicide on themselves and of treason against the hopes of the world." Let's watch this video. It's a 9-minute video. Let's watch it and then we'll discuss it all.
Every farm with slaves was a slave breeding farm. Let's just start there. Because every child born to a slave owner enhanced the slave owner's wealth. And a slave owner was absolutely free to sell any of the enslaved people that he legally owned anytime he wanted. So there was, whether it was Jefferson or any other slave owner, there was always a pressure on, this is where we come up with the term the capitalized womb. There was always a pressure to coerce enslaved women to reproduce as early as they could and as late as they could, as often as they could. The pressure was unsubtle.
You guys, this book is north of 700 pages.
Yeah.
You did extensive research. You've been lauded by historians and academicians for, the incredible research that you did. When you said that women would be coerced and forced, and absolutely forced into submission for whatever the slave owner wanted. In that exhaustive research that you all do, what were the early ages that you found that the slave owners started to have the girl child starting to procreate?
As early as their bodies could do it.
Yeah, just as soon. And there is evidence that slave owners paid fair amount of attention to see when a girl child would be able to start bearing children. And in certain documents that we have read, it got so coercive that if she herself was not interested in partnering up with another African American on the plantation or the farm or the cotton field, wherever it might be, they would just point and say, this one, you go with him. It wasn't like you were actually being married.
Mhm.
It was like, but the point is to get her pregnant as soon as possible,
Mhm.
because, as we say, the capitalized womb, the moment that child came into the world, the credit that the owner of that child had increased automatically at least $50.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
$50 was not a small amount of money for
Mhm.
your average American at that time.
Mhm. And so I'll stay still here with Charlottesville and Jefferson, who many revere
Mhm.
as a damn near a deity.
Mhm.
So Jefferson sort of obviously became president, a highly respected figure. But Jefferson is someone that was quite okay with the laws being established that said the slave owner, if in the midst of him correcting the slave, should he kill him, which would have been murder, should he kill him, there was no legal consequence.
That was the law, generally speaking. I mean, from the foundations of from the foundation, certainly. Well, South Carolina, very much so. Yeah, Jefferson. I mean, more than any other single figure, Jefferson was responsible for the creation of the slave breeding industry in the United States, uh,
Uh,
for actions he took as president.
Ned,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop you there and
Yeah.
have you to repeat that, because we have viewers who are looking in here
Yeah.
who absolutely go down and pay honor and homage to that, again, edifice down on the banks of the Potomac River,
Mhm.
and who revere him as a deity. So please repeat that.
That more than any other single person, Thomas Jefferson was responsible for the creation of the slave breeding industry in the United States.
And can you share with us how he went about doing that?
Very simply, I don't know how many people know this. There's a lot of real basic stuff that people don't know. A lot of people don't know that the slave trade from Africa was prohibited by federal law as of January 1st, 1808.
Yes.
What a lot of people don't know is that date's in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, not as the date at which the slave trade must stop,
Mhm.
but as the date before which it cannot be prohibited. It's the only date
Mhm.
in the Constitution, which otherwise is much more abstract.
Yeah.
It was put in there at the insistence of the South Carolina delegates
Mhm.
to the Constitutional Convention, who wanted a 20-year guarantee that the African slave trade could continue.
Mhm.
There was a confrontation of power at the Constitutional Convention between slave breeding Virginia and slave importing South Carolina.
Mhm.
Virginia held the political cards and it won.
Mhm.
South Carolina's response was to become kind of a renegade state,
Yeah.
which ultimately led the path to secession and civil war. Jefferson's role in this, well, in particular, Jefferson very proactively, as president in 1806, asked Congress to prohibit the slave trade at the earliest possible constitutional date. He already in 1806, he's asking to have this January 1st, 1808 cut off so that not one more African would be brought
Mhm.
than after that date.
Yeah.
And Jefferson really tried to spin it as a humane gesture, but
Mhm. And got credit.
ending slavery would have been humane,
Right.
but slavery didn't end.
Mhm.
What that was protectionism.
Yeah.
Jefferson was responding to not only his own financial predicament, but to that of his constituents in Virginia.
Mhm.
He was making it impossible to bring in the cheaper foreign imports, so that if you want to speak of it in industrial terms, the human product raised in Virginia and Maryland became much, much more valuable, making his colleagues in Virginia much wealthier.
I would just like to add something to this, which is, I think, very important. Throughout the whole history of slavery in the United States, and I'm speaking of the United States as opposed to the colonies before independence,
Right.
Throughout that whole history, the people who were born and bred in Virginia and Maryland gained the most premium prices on the market for all kinds of reasons. And Jefferson was already aware of the fact that their population of enslaved labor had all of those traits and characteristics that other buyers in other parts of the region that were opening up for agriculture in various forms would be looking for. And throughout the whole history, up through the Civil War and abolition, Maryland and Virginia were the center of that. These were the most valuable property that you could buy and sell.
Now, can you give us an example as to why that was? You said the certain traits. Why was that? Why were the slaves from Maryland and Virginia deemed to be more valuable?
All right, that's from the Rock Newman show. Let me see if there was more of a thread here. Great House goes on to say, anyway, read The American Slave Coast, A History of the Slave Breeding Industry by Constance Sublette and Ned Sublette. And that's the cover of the American Slave Coast book. He goes on to say, quote, this unfortunate race whom we had been taking so much pain to save and civilize, have by their unexpected desertion and ferocious barbarities justified extermination and now await our decision on their fate. That's a quote from Thomas Jefferson calling for the genocide of American natives. You got some white folks pushing back as per usual when it comes to a Great House
Every
post.
farm with slaves.
With that said, man, let's have the discussion. I see that the chat has been kind of posting a bunch, so I'll get to the chat in a second. But with it said, let me start with Kofi on this one. Kofi, how one individual helped expand slavery. That should be topic number 2. What say you to what you just heard?
I have to be emotionally in a particular space to hear things like this, because it really, 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 really gets me upset. And I'm just trying not. I'm trying not to let it really permeate my brain right now, because every time, especially when I'm studying anything about African history or anything like that, and I know there's going to be a chapter where it's going to be like genocide or rape or things like that, I have to be in a particular mental readiness for it, because it's just totally despicable. And this is really nothing new for me, or for me, learning. I did learn about, the price that the lady just said about the high price of slaves from Maryland and Virginia. That I didn't know, but that is also not surprising, because people fail to realize that Black people are a commodity, and at the Emancipation Proclamation, we became a liability. I really don't have nothing really much to say. That I'm pretty sure that this is a very smart audience that we have right here. So I don't want to really just repeat something that we already know. I'm gonna try to move the comments. I'm gonna give a different take on that. We need to keep this in the front of our minds all the time when we're dealing with any aspect of life in America and abroad, and the nature of these quote unquote people, right? This is what they will call a civil society, aka Make America Great Again. If you read Sheikh Anta Diop's Civilization or Barbarism, it pretty much plays into how the white psyche works, right? If you also read the Iceman prophecies, also, right? Oh, I forgot that guy's name. It was John Henry Clark was promoting that book too. You read that book too, and many other books I could Michael Bradley. You read that. Also, Kicked Out of Heaven. I got 3 volumes of that. That is even crazy. Once you understand these people, they think, well, okay, yeah, fine. Slavery was bad, but we're still a civilized society because we don't practice slavery anymore. No. You just having running water and a place to live and have a king and infrastructure does not make you fucking civilized. It doesn't. It's your behavior. It's your behavior that makes you civilized. So when they see people from South America, the indigenous people from South America, to the people in Africa, and they say, "Oh, look, this is not a civilized society. Look, these black girls have on no clothing," and like that's not that's you looking through the lens through Europeans. Your behavior is what makes you civilized. I could live in a quote unquote mud hut with a stream with 5 people and be more civilized than someone that has a society that was built by Bill Gates, by Bill Gates or Elon Musk, and they will still be barbaric. So I'm saying this to say that we have to realize, keep this in the front of our minds when we're dealing with these type of people, of how these people are, and we need to be upset. And this is the reason why I like this podcast, is because every time a black person does something that's quote unquote violent, that's white people reacting on some like, shit, did niggas find their senses yet? That's what that always is. Did they find their senses yet that they should be cutting our fucking heads off? Having using black children as alligator bait on breeding farms, or what the professor said right there. All plantations were breeding farms, but they especially had breeding farms. They want to know one day maybe black people are going to wake up and start massacring us all. They don't want another Stoner rebellion. They don't want another Nat Turner. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm not going to talk about the desecration and humiliation of our children. I can't.
Appreciate that, Kofi. Let me just say this real quick. And there's no ID on this. I'm just speaking out loud. One of the things I think black folks tend to do is they
Did you go out, Koku, or is it just me? Guess it's just me.
No, I don't hear him either. I don't hear him.
No,
either.
he did go out. He'll be back.
Oh, we lost Coco. Oh no.
Yeah, he'll be back. I'm sure he'll be back.
Yeah, let me know, please.
Yeah,
we hear you, man. We hear you now.
All right. You know what? Let Buana go. Let me try to fix this situation. All right.
Okay, so this August is a big Pan-African month. This is a big Pan-African month, and my brother Bakari says support black business, and I say as well support black business and support black scholarship. So in this prompt, this has a white male talking about our history collectively, selling his book. But I had to counteract that. There are many black scholars who has addressed these kinds of issues. And I would only ask the brothers and sisters who listening to me to support their efforts in telling our stories globally. So if you want to limit the slave experience to America, there have been many African American scholars who talked about the slavery narrative from a different perspective. For instance, there's a person right now on YouTube. Just check him out. His name is William Mackey. William Mackey. He talks about slavery in America and the details of slavery in America from a perspective of his ancestors. And he speaks about it in a way in a classroom setting, just like how the Dr. Henry Clark used to talk about. Everyone has their different specificities, but he's one of the scholars in terms of talking about the slavery narrative. I suggest anyone under the sound of my voice just visiting his YouTube, go to YouTube, put in his name, Professor William Mackey, and you will be able to have all this information at your fingertips. Another scholar who wrote extensively on this issue in terms of how the president saw slavery in terms of just specifically capitalism. Because Black Steel is going to beat me up about this later and saying, "Moana, didn't I tell you capitalism and slavery go hand in hand?" Well, I'm knowing that there is the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. His name is Eric Williams. He wrote a famous book on capitalism and slavery called the book name is Capitalism and Slavery, and his name is Eric Williams. Anyone who hasn't read that book yet, have a read of that book, because it shows in detail how the slave or the labor of the slave was just specifically seen as capital itself. They wasn't seen as human beings. They just was specifically capital, specifically capital. So he goes into the detail to the extent of how not only businesses, corporations, and plantations use the labor of the black person or black person in the Western Hemisphere, just dealing with capitalism alone. Then also, let me add to the mix. There's also my
Quantum,
sister.
real quick. That book you're talking about is from Eric Williams. He wrote the book from Columbus to Castro, or Castro to Columbus.
No.
Yeah, he did.
I
Eric
think
Williams wrote that book also.
Eric Williams wrote that?
Yeah, Columbus.
Yeah.
Castro.
He wrote that book. Yeah, I got that book.
No sweat. That,
It
let
tells
me
you
let me
about
add.
slavery in the Caribbean. It's very interesting.
Yes. Let me add to the mix. My good sister, who is also a scholar as well, and she no slouch. Matron is currently reading a book right now talking about the slave coast. So if you are interested in these kinds of ideas and details of these things, she reads these things for free, for all to hear, and she annotates these things, and she goes specifically giving her own ideas to what has specifically been happening, breaking it down for any common person who would want to know. She reads these things. She's currently reading something called The Slave Coast. So have a listen to her channel, and because she'll give you some clarity as to what went on. Last person I would like to mention, there's a brother called Dr. Gerald Horne. Dr. Gerald Horne wrote a book called The Counter-Revolution of 1776. He goes into the details of the connection, really the bridge between the Caribbean and the plantations in South Carolina and Virginia, and how slaves was brought from Barbados and Jamaica and other Caribbean islands to fill the plantations of South Carolina and Virginia.
We don't want to hear that tether talk. We don't want to hear that.
Well, we don't want to have that tether information. No,
I'm playing.
But if you are interested, and you don't want to read, there are various things on Dr. Gerald Horne. Have a listen of how he explains these things in detail. These are people who are experts in their industry. So I say that since this is August and since we are supporting Black business, instead of buying this white couples book, I don't know who they are. Go to your brothers and support them, buy their books, contribute to their channels, and do what you need to do to really inform yourself on these topics, rather than just listening to these folks, give an explanation on your history. But I'll leave it there for anyone else who wants to go.
Just as an aside, by the way, I'm back. I had a electrical outage for a second there. Just as an aside, Rock Newman, the gentleman on the right of your screen, somehow and for some reason, I'm not sure his story, but he's considered Black, by the way. He's supposedly a Black man who has a pro-Black agenda, by the way. So do with that what you will.
He's a mulatto.
Afro-Native World in the chat says Rock Newman is African American, descendant of the light-skinned mixed black families of Southern Maryland. So do that what you will. So it's not just a panel of white folks.
Rock Newman ain't selling the book. The people next to him selling the book. I know Rock Newman is a black man, but the people next to him ain't no black people.
No. I'm saying that just for those who might not know. You know what I mean? Afro-Native World says octoroons and quadroons, and Trigger says I've seen his younger pics. He looks black there, but when he is bald, he looks white. Okay, so that tells you what you knew. I'm just putting that. I'm just saying that to for those who might not know, because when I first saw him doing his show on the internet talking, I was like, "Who's this white guy?" And then I vaguely remembered he was a corner guy in boxing back in the day. So, just for those who don't know, who spoke? It was Kofi, then Buana Win, right? And now Black Steel, you've heard what everyone else had to say. What say you to it?
So, a lot of this history, I knew. There were some parts I didn't know. So, but I think, when especially those of us who live in the United States, don't know to the depths of what these crackers are capable of, because this history is not well known. So, like, for example, you mentioned the importation of the slave trade, right, was supposed to, take place, or they could not make any laws until January 1st of 1808, right? This was seen as a compromise between the southern states and the northern states. Those northern states that had already abolished slavery, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, so on and so forth. These states that wanted to abolish slavery versus the southern states that wanted to keep it. So this date was seen as a compromise. This is what they call in the Constitution the Great Compromise, right? The compromise between the southern states, well, part of the Great Compromise, which gave certain representation and so on and so forth, but also that helped include that African black slaves would be counted as 3/5 of a person for the purposes of the census, right? So it just goes to show you how fundamental the ownership of African people was to the United States, its wealth, its building infrastructure, so on and so forth. To me, this is something you never hear. not to bring up the devil, but I never hear these ADOS and these FBA people mentioning this. When they talk about that black people built this nation, yeah, they built it under duress, right? They built it as property. We were never meant to be included as citizens or even considered to be human beings. So it's just to me, whenever we bring up these topics, it's good to go into this history, because a lot of it's not known. Now you have people who purposely remove this history, so that way we don't know exactly what our ancestors went through. So you hear these people say, "Oh, Black American," we're saying that, why is it that we have so many African Americans here and we're not really African Americans? We was really Native Americans. But they want to ignore the role of of breeding farms, which helped produce black people when they couldn't trade them from Africa. And even then, the trade from Africa never ceased. So they still were smuggling black people from Africa. The last slave ship to arrive in America landed in 1860, right before the Civil War. So the idea that there was a hard cutoff, no, and it wasn't enforced. So they were still sneaking in slaves and bringing them to plantations under cover of darkness, with no problem. So the idea that we don't know this history, there's something to be proud of. You know, every year, the descendants of Thomas Jefferson, they have a family reunion at Monticello, right? So this happens all the time, but at the same time, um, his black descent, because if those of us who don't know, Thomas Jefferson had children from his slave, his property. He called the black woman by the name of Sally Hemings. Sally Hemings was actually Jefferson's wife's sister. So when he married his wife, she brought her sister with her, which was supposed to be her, her little maid or whatnot. When his wife died, he started messing with Sally Hemings, who was his wife's sister. She was also 14 years old. So Thomas Jefferson had several children from Sally Hemings. And every year, the descendants of the black Jeffersons go to Monticello for the family reunion. So it's a crazy thing when you think about it. That even after all this time, you have black people still want to identify with and be in close union with their enslavers. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, by the way, Rock Newman was the corner guy for Riddick Bowe, who some will say is the greatest boxer, heavyweight boxer that ever lived. But that said, Brother Bakari, you heard everything everyone else had to say. What say you to all of it?
Well, I'm gonna be honest. I ain't hear everything. I had to fall off. I'm out with my grandkids. I came back. Y'all was talking about Rock Newman, so I wanted to say yes. I know Rock Newman through Riddick Bowe, but he's not black. He's not mulatto. He's not octoroon or quadroon, whatever kind of room someone said. He was a poor white boy who mom and dad told my the only reason I know this, I saw the documentary, who mom and dad said they moved to a black neighborhood because they knew the only friends he would ever have would be black people because no white people would accept him because he's so poor and because they were so poor. And he said he was born there. He showed the house that they lived in and he just grew to love and he embraced black culture. He said those were the only friends that he's ever had. And he did a DNA test to say he wanted to know if he had African in him. And I think he's like 15% African, but uh he's a white he's a white guy that was born and raised around black people. And but in all honesty, he have done things for black people though. In all honesty, he wasn't just talking. That's where he one of the ones who made some money. And we were just talking about what Tyler Perry them don't do, and he ain't make their type of money. But if you look and see, he the one of the ones that made some money and went back to the neighborhood where he was from and helped black folks. In all honesty, uh, now I'm gonna touch on a little bit. I heard Black Steel just say when he was talking about how ADOS and the FBA, he called him the devil. Won't talk about how we built this country with a whip on our back, a dog on our ankles, and a gun at our head. It's not like we moved here and said we're gonna build this. We're gonna build this nation, and it surprises me too. It amazes me too. Not surprised, but it amazes me how many black people want to be associated with slave owners. Just listen to all the black people that claim to be Native American. Have you ever noticed whenever they claim to be Native American, they always claim to be part of the five civilized tribes? Well, I got a video that I'm going to play on when I do my next one, and it was a guy from Oklahoma, black guy. He was on the Roland Martin show, and his family was part of the Muskogee Creek Nation. But he just told the truth because they were finally accepted into the nation now. And even when they even wrote up about how they had to finally accept the African slaves into their nation. But these people, because it's not these indigenous to this land people, they're going to be upset. They don't like that. They're going to say it's a lie. We want to be, even though they want to say everybody in the world was black, which I don't believe that either. There's no way to prove that everybody in the world was black. It sounds good to say, and they were black and they turned to something else. I just don't. Me personally, I don't necessarily believe that. You haven't had enough proof for me, but they are trying to relate to anything other than being African. I even heard some of them say, I heard a couple of people say one time they would be remember the one they found here, supposed to be 9,000 years old, the black one, the she was Australord, whatever they called it. I can't remember the name. I can't remember what they named it when they found it in a piece together. And it came over, supposed to be. They would say they're that. I heard some say they're Polynesian. They want to be anything but African. Anything but African, as Oni would call them. ABA, they're anything but African. And there's nothing you can do with those people. So when we talk about unity and come together, like my opinion, the people that want to come together is gonna be together. I'm not trying to get none of those people. I'm not trying to convince none of those people of anything. It's a waste of time. We can waste our time and say we're gonna try to get all black people, or are we gonna actually finally do some damn work and work with the ones that we have and who want to be a part of us? Let these other people run around and be who they are and whatever it is they are, let them be that. Because like I say, it's a waste of time trying to convince them. It's an absolute waste of time. Let these people be just like the blaggers. I said, just let them be. They love Trump, let them be. All the ones who say they're okay with what's going on, just let them be, because you can't convince them. And since you can't convince them, when are we going to realize that it's a waste of time and there's things that we can do, things that we know that need to be done? Like when me and Koku texting back and forth, we're texting so we can be able to communicate, not just on YouTube, in case something happens, so we can communicate from hundreds of miles away. Things that we know need to be done, that's what we need to do. And just leave these other people on, unless we just enjoy talking on YouTube. And my next live is about, is it a true stereotype, or do we just, is it only a stereotype, or is it a stereotype, or is it true? Do we just talk? That's mine. On that, I'll hear the mic. And I'm probably gonna listen offline because I'm finna go in here and get my grandkids and they're gonna be loud.
Yeah, I hope you're having a good time with them grandkids, as well. By the way,
Oh,
thank
I
you for
am.
that,
Look,
brother
man, y'all
Bakari.
go to my hey, I am. Thank you. Go to my channel and look at the video I put up today. It's Black August, Black Business. I always do it anyway. But go check out the one I put up today, I guess a couple of hours ago. TKT played, I can't remember the name of it, but you'll see it. Black on, like a trampoline park, big bouncy house with everything. But that's what I do anyway. But since it's August, I made sure I had to go do one today.
Appreciate that, brother Bakari. Yeah, by the way, there was supposed to be a whole boycott of African businesses on August 1st, but it seems like that was thwarted by, got to give them credit, a lot of Black Americans spoke out about that over the past week or two, and seems like that was thwarted. I wanted to mention something real quick before I get my last thoughts from you guys. Things that Brother Bakari would have mentioned that we talk about when we text and speak to each other on the phone. We talk about things like this post I put up this week. I'm not going to play the video because it's kind of an ad, but it's about living off the grid. It's about buying things like generators, and in particular, what Bakari and I talk about. In addition to the ham radio stuff, which requires you to actually study and pass an exam to officially operate a ham radio, there's a series of walkie-talkies out now that is going, people can talk to each other from New York to Texas and all kind of stuff like that. That's something I think if we're serious about community, I think that's something that we should look into some more. I'll post some more information as I get it for you guys to check it out. But that's why I said that's why I said at the start of the show, we gotta be serious about what we're talking about, and we gotta put our efforts where our mouth is. We gotta put our monies even where our mouth is, or else it's like what Oni says, to quote Oni for a second time during the show. Else we're just Pan-Africanists. We're not Pan-Africanists. We just like talking about stuff. It's time to actually your stuff. For those of you who live in areas where it's possible to get your firearms, man. Stock up on some canned goods because you never know what's going to happen out here. You know what I mean? Get some training, etc. So that's something I'll talk more about when the Patreon drops in a few weeks. Is there any last thoughts on this prompt right here?
Yeah, yes, Coco. That lady who you put up there in terms of living off the grid, you know, she came to the Bahamas. She loved the Bahamas. You know, she
Yeah.
that Jamaican sister, she loved the Bahamas. She didn't live in Nassau proper. I think that she liked the family islands because it's more natural. She like to live close to nature, and she
I think it
does
was
have. Hello.
Exuma. I think it was Exuma.
Yeah, yeah. So she liked to live that off of the grid lifestyle, and that is an important issue. Brother Bakari, I have my bones with Brother Bakari. I going to go see Brother Bakari one of these days. By the way, I going to Atlanta to see him. But Brother Bakari is a well trained military person, but he never get on that thing where he was teaching people specifically in terms of living off the grid, and that has always been my challenge to him. You need to teach the details of how to's and going about doing things. He built his own air conditioner in his working thing, in his working van or whatever. And I think that he would be very helpful in explaining some of the details because Brother Bakari can't just tell the people to live off the grid. He must show them how to do the things in the details. And so the devil is always in the details. And the people for better understanding and learning how to know is you going through the details of how you're doing. Because what may be self-evident to you because you are a well-trained military individual, it's not self-evident to everyone else. So I would just challenge you to explain the details of when you say living off the grid, what does that look like and how do we go about doing those kinds of things? Just like the sister in the video. But I'll just leave it there because I would never want to hop on my big brother Bakari. He's a great man and I'm gonna see him, but that's my challenge to him sometimes. But I'll leave it there. I'll leave it.
Appreciate that, Buana. Any other last thoughts on this current prompt right here? All right. Let's go to Shoot the Breeze subject number 3 for tonight. Thank you, everyone who's participated in these conversations, from the chat to the panel. Much appreciated. I think the conversation has been a great one tonight, and I hope that we can continue it until about 11 or so p.m.